Pensou no futuro, pensou no presente. Lembrou que você pode sempre contar com a gente. Bradesco Seguros, com você sempre. Com você.
Olá,
Hello, good morning.
Good morning to all of you
who are here in Brazil.
Good afternoon for those that
Good
are
morning,
following
good
us from all the
afternoon, all of
countries.
you who are
I'm
following
Ativo
us from other countries, from
Eu sou
Europe,
Alexandre
from
Kalash.
America. I'm Alexandre Kalash. I'm the president of the International Center of Longevity. And it is with huge satisfaction that we are welcoming you to the 8th Forum, the International Forum of Longevity. It is with partnership with Bradesco Seguros, Bradesco Insurance. It's amazing that we now are at the 8th Forum, which means longevity of the forum itself. It has been a difficult year, and that's why we have the title for our forum of
Envelhecimento 2020.
2020 Aging, Turning the Page. So, Aging 2020, Turning the Page. I think that everyone who is following us would love this 2020 year to turn the page. It's been a difficult year. It's been the biggest sanitary crisis of the modern ages, with a planetary effect, with 1,200,000 deaths here in Brazil, over 160,000 deaths, with all the anxiety, with all the uncertainty in relation to the future, a year that really we wanted to move forward so that we can come to 2021 full of hope. And when we talk about hope, we talk about solidarity, about empathy, about renewal, so that our longevity, you, the younger people, the older ones, so that we can have a more promising future. It was a year of tests, not only for us, elderly people, because, of course, as we are a risk group, we have to take even more care. We're going to continue in social isolation for sure, but we have to continue taking care, and you also have to take care of us, because each young person can bring the virus in, and then the consequences for granny, for your father, for anyone can be fatal. So we
really have to turn the page, but we have to turn the page safely, and this safety is going to allow us to be more healthy, more safe, more active. We're going to have 4 sessions. The first of the sessions is today, and we're going to focus on some topics since the World Health Organization is launching the Decade of Active Aging in a Healthy Manner. This aging, which goes beyond the borders of the World Health Organization. Yesterday, I had an excellent interaction with the General Director, Dr. Tedros, and who dialogued with us, with the organizations of civil society, responded to our quest that really the topic of aging should be very strong in our agenda and in the agenda of the World Health Organization, not only when we talk about non-transmissible illnesses, the care for home care, the vaccination, immunization, but especially the voice of the elderly, that they should be heard. And what I'm going to talk about, which is the humanization of the death process. And also, this was a session that made us emotional, him as well. And this certainty that we have a general director talking to us with the civil society organizations and with academia as well. I say this aware that the first 20 years of my life were in academia, the 13 next years as director of the World Health Organization in the aging department, and the last 13 years working in civil society in different manners. And it's why among our partners, institutional partners, we have Brazilian Society of Geriatrics and Gerontology. They are partners for many years, and we're very happy that you are with us and your members and associates as well. And also Unibis from São Paulo. That is already a tradition. It's a traditional that Unibis has so many longevity events and many carried out by our center. So everyone is most welcome. I would like to thank Bradesco Seguros. It's a solid partnership. We're going to have 4 sessions every Thursday at 11 a.m. The first 3 are going to last 1 hour and a half, from 11 to 12:30. The last one will be a bit longer because we will have 2 more speakers about key topics. Today, we're going to talk about health, and we're going to start within the organization, within the health organization. We have offices in all the countries. We have headquarters, regional headquarters, Pan-American Organization of Health in Washington, but we also have offices of the OPS, Pan-American Health Organization in Brasilia, and the person who's going to talk about the decade of healthy aging is Dr. Lely Gozman, and I give her a warm welcome. So Lely, please, the floor is yours. She's muted. She's trying to unmute her mic. We are trying to find out what the problem is with her audio. We had carried out a test and everything was doing fine. Can you hear us, Lely? So the problem is the reception of her voice. Whilst she is connecting, I would also like to highlight that it's not only a decade of active and healthy aging of the organization, it has been launched next year. It's going to belong to all the United Nations system. We also had an excellent session last week with the civil society. I participated, I spoke in the United Nations in New York, showing that health is not only a topic for the health sector. It goes way beyond. We have to involve UNESCO, the International Bureau of Labor, since work is so essential. So the OECD, the richest countries, the participation of the Population Fund of the United Nations. So it's going to be something with a wide scope so that all the system and all the United Nations family can respond to the challenges of how to prepare a better world for those who have aged, but also that the future cohorts of generations, those that are going to age, can reach aging in better conditions. This has huge implications for a large country like Brazil with all its inequalities, because in another 30 years, 2050, they'll already be 60. So what we always repeat and say in relation to health, the earlier you prepare yourself, the better. It's never too late. It's not only about health. The earlier you start preparing yourself for aging, the earlier the better. It is never too late. Your social relationships so that you can reach aging with a family, with friends, with social capital. We never know what the future holds. So it's extremely important to invest so that we can have this social capital. And obviously, the last capital is also important. That means the earlier we start to prepare our finances, the better. It's never too late, as I always repeat. If you didn't start at 20, you start at 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, you'll always have gains. But the earlier you prepare yourself, the better. It's never too late. In relation to health, this is very clear because our health depends of our lifestyle, of our behavior, but also the environment. A country that has 50% of its population without sewage, the implications are very serious. Ah, can you hear me now? Yes. Something happened here. I don't know what it was. Well, welcome, welcome, and thank you for attending to our invitation. Well, thank you very much. I apologize. Sometimes technology still disarrays our life, but it's a pleasure to be with all you. Thank you for the invitation for this International Forum of Longevity in the name of our representative of the Pan-American Health Organization in Brazil. It's a pleasure to be here with you and to talk with you, to talk with Dr. Kalashi about this challenge that all the countries have to organize and to put into action this initiative of the decade of aging. So I'm going to share with you a presentation. I believe you can see the presentation, right? Good. So in this challenge that all the countries have, and as you have heard, aging has to be healthy. So we've defined this through the International Organization of Health and the Pan-American Health Organization as part of the regional offices. So this slide shows a series of initiatives to strengthen health of the aging population. This initiative, as you can see on the timeline arrow, has had important actions, but for us in the Americas, it's very gratifying to look and understand that this initiative was developed, first of all, in our region. Ever since 2002, we have a series of resolutions where all the countries in the Americas, 36 countries, with territories, a total number of 52, made a resolution about health and aging. This happened in 2012. Then we had an action plan for the health of elderly people, including the healthy active aging. In 2015, we had a response which was heard, and we made a report about health and aging. In the same age, region carried out several actions, the approval of an Interamerican about aging people, an action plan about dementia, and also the creation of cities and friendly communities, friendly to elderly people. Brazil also participated. And so in 2016, we had another series of actions in the World Health Organization of healthy aging, and we continued developing all of this, such as the 700 collaborators and students, elderly people, and we also started a series of investigations about this topic. In 2017, the Global Plan of Action for Public Health and Dementia was approved. And at the same time, the definition of aging as one of the motivators of public health for the next decade in our region. So for 2020, 2030, we organize the plan of healthy aging. This plan, this action plan, as I mentioned with you, was approved in the 57th Board Council of all the participating countries to initiate this plan in 2020. But with all the situation of the COVID, this plan was postponed to start from 2021. So this final report was done with 20 countries of the region, where they talk about the politics, the strategies, and the plan, and what's being done dealing with this topic of aging healthily. 18 countries decided, said that they have legal mechanisms to protect older people. Also, in the countries, 31 countries, they mentioned that they have a focal point on aging in their health ministry. In this report, there is also sectorial work in the aging sector in 20 countries in the Americas, and our area has over 600 certifications of cities and friendly communities to age elderly people. This took place in 2018. 186 communities were added to the global network of cities and communities that are friendly towards the World Health Organization. So, as I said, we have all this information, and we have a final report. So how are we doing then? To talk quickly, we have a new scenario. This new scenario, the index of aging is much quicker to reach this number, and in 15 years, we're going to have a peak in 2030. So in 10 years, we're going to start having a much larger number of elderly people. But globally, the same happening will start in 2055. During the period of 5 years, 1950 and 55, the expectation when people were born in the Americas was only 51 years old. Now, 60 years later, from 2045 to 2050, all the countries in our region will surpass 20 years in life expectation over 60. That means these people will reach 60 years old alive, and they can live another 20 years. In 2050, we imagine that half of the countries of the area will live over 80. This chart, quickly to put things in context, this is showing us the life expectation and the expectation of a healthy life that is increasing in all ages. This is how in our area, for example, 2000, 2005, with the exception of Haiti, all the expectation was over 60 years old, and it went up to over 72 years old. Currently, the expectation of life when you are born in the Americas is 73 years, and we have 18 countries that go over 85: Canada, Martinica, United States, Guadeloupe, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Cuba, Chile, Barbados, and these 10 have over 77 years old. And the expectation of life for an advanced stage, we have 10 countries that reach 22, 24 years over 60 years old, and the women are kept, well, in all the countries, their expectation of life is between 60 and 80 years old. They have a higher life expectancy than men. And together, the expectation is lower than 80. Here we can see between 2010 and 2050, the population in all the world is going to double, and it will go from 349 million to 613. And we foresee that the elderly are going to be dependent, many more dependent people, from 101 to 227 million. And then we're also seeing in this graphic that about 80% of the demand of care is for people over 65, and the prevalence is over 80%, more or less.
En cuanto a priorização, realmente não é muito boa, pois ao nível das prioridades nesta tabela de nossa região, essa perspectiva de risco praticamente na maioria dos países das Américas tem uma prioridade baixa, como vocês podem ver. Então, esse progresso que nós temos na região de envelhecimento, de expectativa de vida, de anos de vida maior, não está sendo uma prioridade para nossos países das Américas, mas é propósito a través deste plano que nossos países tenham essa sensibilidade e den maior priorização a este processo a través de esta iniciativa da década do envelhecimento saudável de 2020 e 2030. E por que é necessária? Vocês todos conhecem que temos uma aliança através dos Objetivos do Desenvolvimento Sustentável. Então, aí é uma boa possibilidade para incluir o envelhecimento na agenda de estos objetivos. São vários objetivos que têm que ver que têm que ser voltados para que sejam viáveis e olhem a esta faixa etária especificamente. Também porque nós temos uma vida mais longa e se precisa ter mais saúde. Igualmente, para transformar todos os paradigmas em relação do envelhecimento.
And we have to transform the paradigm in relation to aging. It is now seen as a problem, and we have to change this paradigm and make it seem to be an opportunity and many actions and documents have been produced. We have a very solid base for the events or actions that have already been taken to implement this process of healthy aging. We have the rights of the aged people. Some of the reports have been prepared, regional ones and local ones, and in this way, we are making this proposal of healthy aging become more feasible. So all of this is related to health sustainable work, and all of this is with the support of the United Nations, which will lead this health vision and this initiative is to bring together governments, international organizations, all professionals, academic institutions, the media, which is very important in this moment of our lives. Communication is very, very important, and also we have to bring in uh, the private sector so that the life of the elderly, their families, and their communities improve and become much better and more successful. And the idea is to give these people a good quality of life. So during this entire process, the idea is to maintain these alliances and focus on these changes that have been developed. And the objective of these alliances is that they become much better, more better organized to listen to different opinions in relation to participation in what all of this means to the elderly, their family members, their caretakers in the communities, and also the other objective of this change is to strengthen leadership and the capacity of adopting appropriate measures that are integrated in different sectors. Another objective with these changes is to make the connections between all the stakeholders so that they can share their experiences and extract lessons learned related to them and ensure a good quality of life. And the next objective is to encourage uh, data on other actions that will speed up and implement these actions in favor of healthy aging. Encompassing public health action on healthy aging is necessary to make this plan move forward. There are many gaps in terms of knowledge on aging, and there has to be a lot more information in this respect to enable much more focused work to be done to ensure the quality of life of the aging population. And in this, so the four action areas were established. These areas are first one, change the mindset and what we feel in relation to aging and ensure that communities promote the capacity building of the elderly, deliver services, integrated healthcare services and primary care services focused on the aged and enable access to long-term care to the elderly that need it. So these are the four areas of action that are under this program called the Decade of Healthy Aging. We are prepared to make this decade a success thanks to the development of communication, and strategic alliances, and all of the ultimate objective is that this decade of healthy aging become a reality, given the fact that the aging population is growing more and more. And this is an opportunity for to plan and organize service networks that meet the needs of the elderly to be able to them a appropriate response to their needs. And likewise, this is an opportunity to build up alliances with other sectors to reduce the impact of aging on the healthcare sector, specifically. And, and in terms of healthcare, we are the consequence of other factors that happen in other sectors. So it's very important to strengthen these alliances to ensure a healthy and robust healthcare sector. Of course, this pandemic has brought up many weaknesses of the healthcare sector. This project is also an opportunity to adapt laws and rules to respond to the needs of this population. Another opportunity is to eliminate preconceived ideas and discrimination on aging, to strengthen healthy aging, productive and active aging, mobilize a social pact for healthy and active aging, and place this issue of aging on the political agenda highest levels of government. So to make sure that our aging population be prepared, be, be included, and that they have a better quality of life. And this is related not only to the healthcare sector, but everything else that involves quality of life. So, nutrition, work opportunities, education opportunities. So, access to access to daily life being high quality access. So, I have come to the end of my presentation. I would like all of you to join us in this effort and that healthy aging in the region of the Americas be a success. And I would like to conclude with the words of Betty Friedman, the well-known feminist and activist. She says that aging is not lost youth, but it is a new era for opportunities and strength. As Betty Friedan said, and she mentions that this is an opportunity. And so we are at a moment where all these opportunities are out there so that our aging population and even we are coming close to aging. All of this is to ensure to have good health and quality of life to maintain this beautiful life that we have in the Americas. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lely, for we are running against time. I would like to share with you, Lely, that life is beautiful in our region of the Americas, but unfortunately, life is not that beautiful for millions and millions of people who live in this region and who are elderly, and many elderly who are not able to prepare themselves well in terms of health care, but also I am a former employee of the World Health Organization. I would like to call attention that the memory of this institutional memory, there are things that many issues related to aging have not been focused on. Yesterday at the meeting, there are programs that have already been implemented in this respect, and our precious legacy is the lessons learned in the sense that anything that is implemented for the elderly has to follow scientific, must have a scientific basis. I'm very proud to say that our center is working on the pilot project for a favela, and with the idea of preparing not the formal areas of the cities, but also we are going to work on the most needy communities that live on the sidelines of the big cities and who are suffering not only because of health issues, but also because of economic issues. And as you said, it is absolutely necessary for us to have, we have to have a universal healthcare system. This is something that does not exist in the United States, as it has been evidenced by the number of deaths caused by the pandemic. And if we're not the universal healthcare system in Brazil and the dedicated work of all our health specialists, we're going to be in the same situation here in Brazil as in the United States. Now, I would like to invite our speaker. She is from the College of Public Health of the University of São Paulo, and her presentation will be followed by family physician will talk on primary care. And so we have these two presentations, one after the other. So and after the two presentation, we will have a short question and answer session. Maria, welcome. It is always a pleasure to have you join us. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. And I always am very thankful for the opportunity of talking about the possibilities that we have been focused on. And I would also like to congratulate the fact that we are about to begin the decade of healthy aging. And as I was listening to Lely's presentation, I felt very encouraged because I think people are beginning to become aware of their responsibility in terms of dealing with this aging population. And of course, we realize that we have to work together to promote the better quality of life for this aging population. But as Kalash said, we have been working on these issues for quite some time. We have a policy for active aging, and this message has already been conveyed. So I think the biggest challenge, is to reflect on how to effectively produce healthcare systems, welfare systems, public policies that really deal with these challenges that we face. We are going through a pandemic where the visibility of the elderly people has increased, and this, as has the visibility of the healthcare system. We say that we need the universal healthcare system in Brazil. We are not talking about something trivial. We know that we also need a universal system of welfare policies. We have to have a social security system that includes life as a heritage, as the right of society, and does not work in the lines of private market reasoning. For example, there are many people who need care. However, in Brazil and Latin America, and when we think of the social determination of health and sickness, it is not only the healthcare systems that determine how we can age better. And as already been said, we have to think of water supply, sanitation, food. We need urban policies because we age in the cities. So this is not something trivial. When we look at the city as being friendly to the elderly, this has to be a public policy. And this means that public policy have to be built up together. So we have to think about the needs of elderly. We have to listen to them. We have to include them in the preparation of these public policies. Healthcare systems, when they are universal, they are funded by taxpayers and they are open to all. So this is the universal character of these healthcare systems. No distinction of age, creed, ethnic background, or anything. Everybody has the right to the universal public healthcare system. And this healthcare system, it has to think not only of the treatment of diseases, but has to have a broader view of health. So, and the idea is also to reduce inequality. And of course, this can only be done through public policies that view the eradication of inequality. And also, there has to be a response to the public policies and to minimize this inequality. There are so many structural inequalities. For example, racism is one of them. We're talking about issues that involve social welfare policies as a whole, and also we have various international publications saying that the possibility of universal care systems makes a difference. That has already been proven in the literature because they make a difference in pandemics such as this one that we are facing now, because this means that universal healthcare systems are able to take care of the population on a daily basis. So this is not an individual decision, but about choosing where I want to put my healthcare system. What first of all, we have to public care. I know that's not easy to ensure everything ready all the time, but we have to. So this policy of active aging entails the production of urban policies, and it entails making cities a better place for the elderly people to live, and also this entails giving access to water supply, sanitation, food, and so on. All of this has to be available in the universal healthcare system. Is primary care, and this is the base of any universal healthcare system, which is focused on the patient and also focused on the elderly. And this is strongly linked to the territory. We have to acknowledge vulnerability of the territory, the higher or lower risks. We have to think of the fragility of the elderly. We have to acknowledge the risks that they run. And in this respect, we have to indicate responses to their needs. And this can be done with multidisciplinary team networks. And we have to produce this kind of integrality in the systems. And all of this focused on our decade of federal systems. And sometimes they battle
they
between
don't
themselves.
integrate with a lack of a coordination of a national system of health that has a local base, but that needs a coordination so that everyone has the same practices of care. So a lot of municipalities have a lot of different demands that not always have the responses from other levels of the government. So we need goodwill, we need financing, and then the public system, it has to have funds to attend to all these needs. We live in Brazil of freezing of expenditures for social issues, and this is very concerning. What is going to happen to our public budget next year? We need financing. When we look at the expenditure in health in Brazil, we see that the private expenditure is more than the public. So the public expenditure is very reduced. 75% of the people depend on SUS, and they have to do this with 25% of the resources. This is a difficult account, even though we have all efforts with the system, it's difficult. And we also need regulation of the public-private sector, bringing this sector to compose the relationship within public space, not relying or counting on the interests of each one, not sort of medicalizing the old age, but to help producing care, inputs, strategic actions in the right measure, regulated public sector. And these actions of integrating universalization of a public national system, such as our Brazilian SUS, as everyone has highlighted, we have to look at aging from this point of view, that aging brings other issues that have to be taken into account. Today in the pandemic, it seems that we find that the old houses for old people, we need vigilance, safety, sanitation measures, a social assistant working together with these homes and knowing these people, responding to their needs, building therapeutic projects, and giving basic attention. Everything was already known and was a challenge, but the pandemic makes this even deeper. This has to be taken care of. This care of the aged people, we have to work with articulation, social, sanitary. We need investments. We need to form to educate and train health care professionals. We need the more formal areas of care. So a town that can produce better environments that empower the elderly person to be able to live better and to participate in a safe manner and trained and educated all life. So how does this permeate the health system? The networks of healthcare have to have inserted in them care for the elderly. They have to be intersectorial. You need articulation for this care and for long-term care, as well as, for example, active aging, quality of life. How are these coming together with these people? Now people need to isolate, but you also have to connect elderly people. I was talking with a group and I said, where are the elderly? How is the risk? How do we connect to them? How do we how do we get closer? How do we dialogue with them without putting them at risk? So if I know the territory, if I know the elderly, if I know their vulnerability, in the basic attention, I will be able to produce good care articulated in a friendly city, because it is in this territory that we live. That's where we occupy the public space. And how does the occupation of this space by the elderly, how do they participate, and how do they produce public policies? So when we get to this, it's something fundamental, and SUS will help us in Brazil to age better. But for this to happen, we need funds, we need political, we need the will, so that old age is something good for everyone and not something good just for one person. A person that is older but doesn't have a sort of a social pact for a collective aging for the common good that depends on public policies that produce the public good. So universal systems of health that guarantee and protect us beyond other policies. It has its limits, but it is fundamental so that we can have solidarity, care, participation, and longevity revolution. Thank you very much. Thank you to you, Marilia. You're always extremely precise in your defense, and a central point, as has been shown in the response of COVID. And I would add another word that rhymes with longevity, which is dignity, dignity of people. Keep this dignity up so people can age and not with all the expression as was made so evident. This is one of the topics that we're going to talk about on the last day by the person that takes care of this. So thank you very much. Stay with us and let's see if we're going to have time for a debate later. So I'm now going to call Eberhard Cross, who is a family doctor of the community in one of the communities, one of the poorest and violent areas in Brazil. We're talking about an area called Rocinha. Welcome. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you. Do you hear me well? No, his microphone is not very good. You are now frozen on the screen. My technical friends, can you help him? He's speaking on the microphone. How are we now? Are we okay? A bit better. Like Doutora Lely, I think I had some technical problems, but if there's any issue, please interrupt me. Well, I'm going to start thanking you for the opportunity of being here to talk to you about a topic that is very dear to my heart. I'm a community doctor and I work in primary health care. And there's a perfect sequence with the previous speakers. Dr. Lely talk about the areas of action of aging, and she had 4 areas on her slide. One of them said, you need primary care centered on elderly people. Sure, this is what I do in my profession, and what the World Health Organization and other spaces suggest be done. So it's having a cohesive health system. So we want to organize a space of care for the elderly people. We need a strong health system. We need funds, especially. And we also need an organization for the system. This has been happening for many years, but even so, we have difficulty in implementing of what we already know, of putting into practice ideas that are very well established. We do not know what we're talking about really when we talk about primary attention. So during the next 10 or 15 minutes, I'm going to talk about this topic. And what kind of better possibility of care this system will offer. It's very important. So what is it and how it works? For us to understand what ATS is, it's primary attention to health, we have to understand what is the community family doctor. He's not the only professional. They have other professionals working. They have family nurses. I think in our mind, it helps to build this idea. So who is the family doctor? We have an image when we think of doctors, how they used to be way back, the family doctor who attends all the family, the mother, the grandparents, the children. That was a person who used to come to people's homes, or you would go to his office and he would attend everything, any health problems.
Congelou de novo. Vai.
Esse tipo de profissional que vai fazer, vai ter a formação adequada.
This type of professional will, his connection is very bad, very difficult to hear what he's saying. So the idea is to respond to the more common issues. Basic aspects, building of family relationships, how human beings behave, and how the most different health issues emerge. So consequently, what's more common is going to be known and solved, and what is not common, which is a minority, is going to be referred to another professional. So this image of a doctor way back is correct. So if there's a need for a surgery or something more important, then the person will be referred to another doctor. The international literature researchers say that a lot of the problems will be solved in the primary attention with a team that has this community doctor, the community nurse, everything within the structure that health system has, with professionals that have adequate education. So good results can be reached. So they have a team. They have a team that works in this basic care in poorer areas. And if there's a bigger or more severe problem, they're referred to someone else. And obviously it's a doctor, a professional that has studied. So this helps us have an image of what it is. And in general, I would like to highlight 4 aspects that are known, which are the 4 fundamental attributes or essential to the basic health care, which help us understand when we organize a system. So it's access, integrality, longitudinality, and one more which I didn't get. So I'm going to talk about these 4 aspects. it's very important and very good for the elderly. The first one is access, the first contact. So the person has to have easy access. So, for example, I have a headache, or I have to revise my diabetes control, or I'm depressed. I need to be able to quickly access a sector of the health system that gives me a good response. Another area is emergency area, but we need to solve this with a specific health program. So if it's necessary to have continuous care, the emergency is not going to solve the problem. Someone else will have to be referred. So the first thing, as I said, the first thing is access. The person has to be able to reach. You can't attend people if they don't have access. After this, we need something called integrality, which is an idea in biological, psychology, social aspects. So spirituality, it's the whole of a person. It's a look to recognize how these people interact and how we can act with them to improve things. So, for example, to give you an example, a person that is 70 and has to change their food, this is not someone says you have to eat more of this and less of that. So in which culture is this person inserted? What financial possibilities do they have to buy a certain food? If we don't consider this, is that they'll ignore us and it won't make any sense at all. So we're going to have to adequate the recommendations that we give to each individual. That's why we need this sort of holistic look. So integrality can be translated a holistic way of attending. 3, to attend this person in a timeline. So the idea is to start today, knowing that we're going to see the person again, and in another 15 days, perhaps the person is going to be seen again. So this will guarantee, or will allow us to get to know. We'll have a large amount of knowledge that allows us to care better for this person. And ideally, if we can start this accompaniment or working with this person before, then this will guarantee when this person is older, he'll receive care from someone that already knows him. There'll already be all these years accumulated.
And in addition to the specific moments of that health care, and of course, this will make a difference in these people's lives, so that they have when they continue throughout their lives, they live a dignified life, and so that they can. This is absolutely crucial within this process. And the fourth item, and perhaps it's a bit too technical, is referred to as coordination. This is totally related to organizing the system. And here we focus on people have a specific health issue. For example, a pregnant woman has to have the follow-up to make sure that she has a healthy pregnancy. And I know that this pregnant woman, on account of a complication, has to go to a maternity hospital that looks after high-risk patients. But what will I do with this pregnant woman? See her here at the community level, and then I'll refer her to a specialized hospital to get the special care that she needs. And so, but I know that this woman will probably have to go through surgery, and I, as a family doctor, also know that she will need a cardiologist maybe because I know that she has high-risk patients and I have to know what these other doctors that are referring to are going to deal with her. And so it's like orchestra, a conductor. You have to bring everything together to make sure that the proper care is given. All of this has to be very clear to all of us. So this is the image of coordination. So this is just a review to give an idea of what primary health care entails. If patients have any doubts about healthcare, they come to us as their family physicians, and we can clarify things for them. I can also refer to patients to a specialist. And how to understand this work? First of all of this has to be thoroughly based in scientific research. There is a lot of evidence showing that continuous healthcare, especially primary healthcare, is something absolutely essential for anybody to achieve quality of life. And this will have an impact on birth rates, on mortality rates. We know that this is not an easy process, but we have every reason also to take care of ourselves and of society as a whole. This is essential. And, in the slide of Dr. Lely, she said integrating primary care services, especially have to be especially focused on the elderly. What does this mean? And all of this has to be very clear in the way these primary healthcare services have to be focused on. Whether the elderly person goes to the public healthcare system or the private healthcare system, but this person, this person goes into the universal healthcare system, this person will be seen by a physician who knows the history of this patient, who knows what his healthcare issues are. This physician will be familiar with this person's needs and preferences and so on. And if a patient comes in and this patient is taking of an elderly relative, the family physician will know this background, this history. So the idea is to focus on the patient. We have to be at the service of the people, of the patients that we deal with. And to this end, we have to be thoroughly prepared as healthcare professionals. And we have to establish this relationship of trust and commitment with our patients. Because this patient knows that he will be able to trust you no matter what. And as we always have to keep in mind that the elderly are fragile, and hence this special focus on specific care for the elderly. I have this commitment to meet our patients' needs not only from the individual point of view, but also from the point of view of the system. And as I said again, having a relationship of trust is very, very crucial, and this is one of the most important aspects, especially in primary healthcare systems. So the two key words are trust and
Obrigado, Eberhard.
thank
Teria
you,
vários pontos que eu
Eberhard.
gostaria de comentar com
There are
você.
various
Eu sei
issues
que o
that
nosso
you
tempo
raised that I
é
would like to
muito
comment on. I
restrito
know that we're
e, de
running
modo
out of
que,
time.
nesse momento, eu só vou,
So
através de você,
at this point,
fazer esse
through you, I'm
agradecimento.
going
Não fosse a atenção
to
primária à saúde, não fosse o SUS, a
focus
nossa
on
situação
primary
nesse
healthcare. And if it were not
2020
primary
seria muito
healthcare
mais
and
complicado.
our universal
E o nosso
healthcare system,
próximo
our situation in
audições,
Brazil
virando a
would have
página,
been
nós estaremos falando
much
então
worse. You talked
bastante,
about turning the
ainda mais,
page,
de
but
forma que o
unless we have
agradecimento, eu
universal
acho que esse
healthcare system,
agradecimento está se
uh,
manifestando
the
de várias
situation here would have
formas
been
de
much
toda a
worse.
sociedade
We have to be
brasileira, e nós iremos
grateful that we have
voltar a
the
você com
system.
alguns pontos
And
pontuais.
now I
Eu
will
queria
go back to
começar
some
a
issues that
discussão
you
com
raised.
a
And I would like to
vice-presidente
start the discussion with the Vice
do Fórum
President
Internacional de Longevidade, doutora
the
Carla
ILC,
Giacomini, que
Dr.
tem feito
Carla
um
Giacomini.
trabalho
She
também
has done
louvável, fantástico, em
fantastic
nome da
work
sociedade civil,
in the
mobilizando
name
mais
of
de
the civil
1.200
society.
voluntários
She
Brasil
has
afora
mobilized more
para
than 1,200
proteger os mais
volunteers from all over
esses
Brazil
que
to
vivem
protect the
em
more
situações
vulnerable people, those
institucionalizadas,
who
nas
live
residências,
in
em lares,
institutions, in
muitas vezes muito
home care
precários, e nós vamos
centers,
capacitar
under very
que
precarious
você
conditions. And if
esteja
we're not the
desde o
work being
início,
done by
desde quando
Carla,
ainda eram
things
11
would
mil
be much
mortes por
worse.
números computados no Brasil, e você teve a
Uh,
visão e a
you had
percepção de que
the
nós temos que fazer alguma
perception
coisa, porque
we have to do
esperar
something
que
to deal with these
novas
elderly who are
instituições
institutionalized under very,
pode
very
ser
precarious
difícil. Muito
conditions.
obrigado, Carlos.
Otherwise, it might be too late. Thank you, Carla.
Não estou te ouvindo.
Her mic is off. Okay, she's
Muito
back on.
obrigada pela oportunidade
Thank
de estar
you
aqui, né?
for this
A gente está
opportunity
podendo
of
conversar
being
sobre
here
tantos
to
desafios,
be
né?
able to
Em tão pouco
talk to you
tempo,
about
nós
all these
somos
challenges in
absolutamente
such a short time. We were
engraçado a gente
totally,
dizer bouleversé, né? Quer dizer, completamente
I would say,
modificados pela
flabbergasted.
realidade que nos tirou do
The
eixo
reality
e nos
changed us
colocou
completely, which threw us
absolutamente
off balance, and which put us
colocou
into
a nu todas as nossas fragilidades, né? Acho que essa
such
é
a
a grande verdade que
stressed all our
pandemia
fragility.
trouxe.
And this is the real
Acho que é muito
that
importante a
we
gente
thought
pensar
of
numa
this
década do
pandemic.
envelhecimento
I think
ativo,
it's
como foi
very
proposto pela
important to give
Lely,
this like
mas é
interactive
fundamental, no nosso caso, no nosso meio,
aging.
reforçar as estruturas
It is
formais que nós
absolutely
temos,
necessary to
especialmente de
reinforce
política, né?
the formal structures that we have,
E de
especially in
política de
terms of public
saúde, que são
policies, and more
absolutamente
specifically,
necessárias
healthcare
e ainda
policy,
muito pouco
which is totally
valorizadas.
necessary
E o mesmo
and
comigo com
still
relação
not
à população idosa
capacity enough for
institucionalizada, que se
70%
mostra a
of
mais
the
vulnerável frente
population
à
with
Covid e, no entanto, a mais
best,
negligenciada, digamos assim, não fosse a
this
atuação da
population
própria sociedade civil, com o
not
apoio
focused on
do Centro Internacional de Longevidade, com o apoio da Sociedade Brasileira de Geriatria e Gerontologia, da Associação Brasileira de Enfermagem e tantas outras entidades que se uniram a nós para tentar
geriatrics
modificar uma realidade que
incentives
estaria
all
posta,
joined
né?
us in this
Nós
effort,
estaríamos agora
and
contabilizando
our
mais de 40 mil
objective is to
mortos
change this
só nas
reality.
instituições, não
We
fosse a
have
atuação da
more than
sociedade civil.
40,000
Então,
people
acho que
passed
esse
away
é o momento da gente marcar realmente
in
posição e dizer que a
homes
gente
for the
precisa estar
elderly.
junto
So
para a gente
we have
vencer
to
as dificuldades que
get
são muitas.
together and overcome the difficulties that
Excelente,
are
Carla.
so abundant.
Esse,
Thank
esse diálogo é muito importante,
you. This
porque
dialogue is very
nós estamos
important
passando por uma
because
onda
we are going
Covid
through
que foi
very,
particularmente
very difficult
difícil para as
moments,
pessoas idosas
which
no
was
Brasil.
especially difficult for the elderly
74%
people.
das mortes foram de pessoas com mais de 60 anos.
74% of the
Então, ontem eu estava
deaths caused
conversando
by the COVID
com a
were
Dona Amélia Camarão,
of people who were
que
over
tem
the
feito um
age of
trabalho
64.
extraordinário de trazer
I'm
esse
talking
exemplo,
to someone who
e a gente
is
está vendo que
doing some extraordinary
em
work
um ano
to
e
show
4
these
meses
figures
já foram perdidos
in
de
1 year
vida
and 4
duas
months.
pessoas, no geral, no Brasil,
In general,
nesse tipo de
in
situação.
Brazil,
Então,
so
quem
many
tem
people have
60
passed.
anos e espera viver
Anybody who is
mais
60
4
years
anos
old
já é uma
and
parcela significativa.
expects to live
Para quem tem
another
78
23
anos, você
years. This is a very significant part of the population. Someone who is 70 years old, losing 1 year of your life means that you're losing 20% of the years ahead of you. So this is just the impact that all of this has caused. And I would like to talk about these three presentations that we just listened to. Because this is all what motivated the WHO to unleash this process to implement this decade of healthy aging. It's not only enough to be healthy, but it has to go way beyond that. Yes, you can be diabetic, or you have high blood pressure, or any problems related to aging, chronic diseases. But you can still continue being active. For example, we have to talk about the rights of the elderly. And this is something that is not on anybody's radar. So the elderly have the right to health, the right to safety, the right to a good style of life. And as you were pointing out, when I was talking to someone from the WHO, the civil society has to be aware of this. We have to have more dialogue. But what became very clear with COVID is that there's a lack of dialogue amongst the healthcare system and other systems. We have a universal healthcare system that works very well. But social welfare is not doing so well here in Ireland. You know that social welfare um, has been frozen for quite some time. So there's this extreme need of making a huge effort of carrying on this dialogue. I want that as such, I want this problem to be solved. And you, as with your experience in management, you have been working this fantastic work because you are focusing exactly on the more vulnerable people, especially the aged who are in these precarious conditions. And this is why we have to envision this integration between social welfare and healthcare because these elderly are so vulnerable. I'm talking about the ones who are institutionalized specifically. I'm sorry, her mic is off again.
Desculpa. Num país que a gente
I
tem
apologize. In a
a
country
imposição de uma interrupção de um conselho,
where a committee was
a Frente Nacional ela faz
was
também
the
a frente de
National Front in
fortalecimento dos
our country
conselhos.
is
E é
also
importante que os conselhos se
used as a
estabeleçam, né? E no caso
entity
da
strengthen
assistência
the
social e da saúde, essa falta de diálogo é histórica,
councils, and
né? E
this lack of
a
perhaps
noção de que a
rights
assistência social cuida
historical,
só do
this dialogue
precário,
between
eu acho que
health
isso também
services
precisa
and
ser
social
revisto,
welfare services.
porque a assistência
This is
social pode
something that has to be
promover serviços,
social
né? Ela não
welfare
pode
can
só
provide healthcare services,
apagar incêndio,
social
digamos assim,
welfare
né?
system.
Então acho que tem uma
This should not
lacuna
only
muito
be a
grande de atuação,
multiplier, but
mas é
huge
importante que
gap
as pessoas
that
que
is
os
also
atores, que
important.
os gestores estejam
But the
dispostos
mayors, the
a
managers,
enfrentar
be
juntos
willing
os problemas,
to
né? Inclusive do ponto de vista do
face
sistema de
these issues,
formação que não se
these
conversa.
challenges together.
Acho que o que você disse é muito
This
claro.
dialogue has to
Nós estamos
happen,
pagando
and you have made
caro
this
por
very
esse
clearly, Lely.
distanciamento.
We are paying a very high price for this distancing, for this huge gap between social welfare services and healthcare services. This is a conversation that needs integrality that Eberhard pointed out so well. If we could now uh, can we have a conversation now with our representatives? We have another couple of minutes. Marcelo, could you bring us together? In the meantime, I would like to say our thanks to Renata, who is our sign language, Brazilian sign language specialist. And I would also like to thank the interpreters who are working on the simultaneous translations. And thank you very much, all of you. Can we have a full view of the four speakers, please? So thank you very much. And now would like to thank once again Lely Gozman. And I know that she's very busy, but I'm glad that she's able to join us. I would also like to mention Bernardino Victoria was with us 2 weeks ago during a Latin American symposium. We worked on the issues related to this decade. So we have Lely, Anita, Eberhard, and Carla. It's important for you to know Carla has these wonderful cats that run around her living room and that run up and down. And this is when Carla gets distracted every once in a while, and she's absolutely in love with these cats. She talks to them. She's charmed by them. Sometimes it seems that Carla's not paying attention, but she is. But it's actually that her cats are in the
Por
system.
favor,
I know that,
mil
Carla.
desculpas, Alexandre.
Please, I
Eu
apologize, Alicia.
estou realmente
I am really
dividida, né? Mas eu estou prestando atenção.
divided, but
Eu
I am
sei que
paying
não está
attention.
fácil para mim,
And I know
mas
that it's
eu vou
not
conseguir.
easy for anybody, but I will be able to convey my message. Yes, I know you very well. I know your smile, and I can tell that the cats are running around and attention. But Carla is a multitasker. She's a multitasker, so she can deal with the cats, her husband, her home, with LPIs and everything that goes through. I would like to provoke some discussion. One of the things that I'm concerned about, and Eberhard, first of all, you could say something about this. Yesterday, I had a dialogue with the general director of the WHO, Dr. Williams, and I had to challenge the WHO in the sense of bringing up something that is provoking a lot of pain. It's not only the deaths of all these 160,000 people that passed because of any death caused by COVID is a premature death. No matter what, it was a premature death. No matter how old the person was, nobody knows how much longer a person will live. Anybody who's 80 or 90 years old. So, but this pandemic didn't affect you. And death in Brazil became something banal, something trivial. 70,000 disappeared. And I'm not even talking about other causes of death, such as accidents that can be prevented. You don't need so everything, all of this has been all very traumatic. We don't talk about accidents anymore. We talk about trauma. Accidents, the word accidents brings something of a fatalistic outview on life, but I would like to provoke you in the following sense. The adults are becoming just trivial. This was the theme that some of us focused on some time ago. And we wrote an article about this. This was published in the Folha de São Paulo. So adults are becoming something trivial. Death is becoming something banal. People die in traumatic circumstances and without this feeling of being welcomed. And now, how many deaths, how many hundreds, thousands of deaths occurred, and which caused trauma to the families. These families had no comfort. They did not have this warm embrace. They were not able to mourn their dead. Eberhard talks about medicine of people for the people.
This was a topic of his
that he wrote
about. I would like you to help me think about this, because this was a challenge that seemed extremely engaged to respond, because it's not only death, it's that wholeness, that if you're working with a person, you'll understand what are the consequences for these people, the trauma that this death, not only in Brazil, the trauma of this death and the impact that this has on these families.
Me escutam bem? Começo eu, então. Acho que
I believe that this provocation makes a lot of sense. Making the death into something trivial, especially in this pandemic, but a lot of things became very obvious in the last months. Like all fatalities, it's that they reach those people that are more vulnerable in society. So that's what it means to say that someone is vulnerabilized. So that person has a higher chance of being affected by that, right? So that means that with a social arrangement, that person will be affected in a worse manner by the problems of our society. So I think this is something that already happens for many years, more for women than for men. The sequence is long. So I think in the pandemic, this becomes so large that this sort of reaches a much higher proportion for all members of society. And then we understand what's happening for years for many people. But when it's with our grandmother, when it's with João, with a friend, this of course affects us much more, because there are traumas in life, and the idea is, as Tailashi says, how do we deal with this? If we make these deaths into something trivial, if we go on this sort of wave, there's a writer that if we have a social structure that says everything is fine, that people can die like that, everyone that's listening to me, everyone's going to die like that. But can we take care of this process and not make it something trivial? Can we have pity? Can we avoid a trauma on top of a trauma? This is something life imposes us. Perhaps we can take care of ourselves in a better way. But I think our moment requires social cohesion, and Brazil lacks this social. So since I don't identify with someone else's suffering, because I don't see him as an equal, this makes things more difficult. So this also refers to conditions of life that we tolerate and that is so unequal. And with all the spectrum of inequality, as you said, it is inequality of genders, of race, of color, of access to rights. So all of this adds, and that's why I said that the pandemic has sort of left us naked, totally exposed in our frailty. in long permanence. If you think that the therapeutical residences of people that have mental disorders, 70% of people who live in these communities are aged, elderly people. So it's not only long-term care for social assistance, but even long-term care offered to mental health has to be revised. We can't go back on a route that we've left. So highlighting your words, the issue of solidarity, of empathy, these are words that often, at least I can't remember these words being said, because all the focus is on caring, on curing. We've been trained to cure. To cure what? If these are illnesses that are not curable. So the emphasis should be on care. So this ends up by a distortion, because I was dialoguing with one of the directors of health talking about this issue, that the systems in general, they privilege the interventions. So I'm going to get more, or for example, the manager of a hospital, if he does more interventions or more ultrasounds or injections or whatever, but one doesn't think about the time that it takes to care for a person. Care might mean for you to go to the person's house to see the social conditions in which this person lives. But if the doctor is going to dedicate time to this, he's not going to get paid. So I think the implementation of a decade of healthy aging contributes with the paradigm of taking care. This can reinforce all this system that has been created that does not take into account the person, but what's behind the person. Yes, Kalash, I think you're touching on a very important point, which puts us front to front with this commerce of the health, and the economical value is what is more appreciated. And we have metrics based on productivity. You define how much you make based on productivity, always linked to procedures, to curing, because no one values these actions of integrality. So I think this pandemic in a time where we're very frail in this aspect, because we as a society, we are in a process with a very strong turn to the obscure, to denial. So it's very much weakened. We have the expectation that we can improve in this decade and call attention to other things and value the care of the general practitioner, and not only look for a cure, because our tendency is to live with care and not cure, especially with the advent of chronic illnesses. We're going to have to live with them. So we're going to have to educate people to understand that the metrics can't only be quantitative. They have to take into consideration other aspects, and we have to humanize things. And then we go away from the economical, quantitative. Well, this is a discussion that interests everyone, right? These initiatives Bradesco is trying to develop initiatives that can privilege this more integrated part, turn towards the family. And if there are a lot of people that are suffering with this, the last funeral I went to had many more people on the outside looking at their cell phones and the messages arriving that had to be responded than people comforting the family. This is now part of our culture. It's not only the health, and it's very difficult, right? Because you work in a healthcare, you're there in a healthcare college, you're there to measure the importance of the studies. Talk a little bit, please, about this aspect, the quantitative aspect, because often what is not quantified becomes invisible. Yes, I believe that this invisible part is really what sort of kills us, and it really disturbs. So the need of a social pact so that we can take more care of the elderly. It's the same thing as the public policies, how much we need this. There's no point in paying. This doesn't solve that. We have recent publications that says if the public systems of public health don't respond to the needs of people and are not in conflict with other topics, they won't be able to take care of people and confront the social issues that are part of the process of aging. And in this sense, I think we have to be able to invest and produce. When the Pan-American organization brings that scale, that timeline of everything that's been done, thinking of a study that is coordinated, Maria Alice Lebron, who's passed away, when I start thinking of the researches about aging articulated in Latin America, all the efforts of the longitudinal studies or studies of people in homes for the elderly, how can we understand and also come out of this procedural logic? We don't only want to know if there was attended, has high blood pressure, doesn't, but how does a person live? How does a person feel respected or not? Dignity, care, and this extra care, care that takes care. We say the production of care in networks of attention. So following people in their life, the way that they live, respecting the way that they live. How can we capture this with the experience? Looking at a city, how can a city become more friendly towards old people? I think one of the important thing is that they have to be heard, they have to be listened to. Focal groups, the possibilities of the meeting. This meeting is very rich. So the listening, sometimes public policies say, but wasn't this already solved? Isn't this happening? Don't people trust? No, yeah, they do, but they're sure that things are not going to happen. People don't feel cared for. The social pact would be a society that trusts public policies. I'm at home, but I trust and I'm taken care of. We have solidarity public policies, worried about, concerned with everyone, not policies that allow people to die, but measures where everything matters and policies that build trust, commitment, and trust for all of us. This has to come into our measures. This has to show up It has to have visibility. And how difficult it is, isn't it, for you to measure trust? You can have this as a central point to have an elderly life that you can trust. You have to know that you're going to be protected. You have to feel safe. We're going to cover these topics in this forum. This alienation caused by this strength that the curing has versus caring. So this is something that we have to bring here, and we have to understand the importance in life. Look at the resilience issue, which has already been one of the central topics, but this topic will be debated again. All these aspects, they're very important. Why? They're very important because active aging is important. The word is not only healthy, it's active. Otherwise, you have this tyranny. You have to be strong, you have to be healthy, you have to be macho, and you end up with this language for the weaker and for the older and those that are more excluded. You send a message that you're not important. It's not only being healthy, super healthy, strong, the peak of your ability kind of thing. So that's what happens when we're 25, 30 years old. I, for sure, don't run with the same speed and the same strength that I did when I was 50 years ago. I don't even need to, right? So that's very important for us to be able to age well and have this life, good quality of life. It's important to think of the protection measures of safety, because with safety, you trust. And it's a virtuous circle. If I trust, I'm safe. To be safe, I have to trust. So when you mistrust, things begin not going so well. That's why we put a lot of emphasis, and I talked a lot about this, of having a vigorous talk with the World Organization of Doctors, those who work with palliative care, those who work with residential care. Let me wait. There's some noise behind me, he says, so that really the World Healthcare Organization can deal with the suffering and not leave anyone behind. I think this decade, I hope the goals will be of sustainable development, and our obligation, whether it be academia or the engaged public center, as Eberhard said, or the civil society through their work, whether it be through the representation of the sector, because we are the partners that are going to be able to follow. And what Marilia just said, nothing. We want to turn this page. We want to turn this page. Turning this page to be able to get into a new decade with more hope, more protection, more safety, more humanity, empathy, compassion. These are words that we heard today. These are central words for medicine, people to people. So I'm going to thank everyone, congratulate everyone for the excellent interventions. I always trust you a lot, the family of ENC and our companions from Opus. After we've worked in the Pan-American Health Organization, I continue feeling as a member of the family, as was very clear yesterday. I'm going to thank our partners of always, Bradesco, for the support, the partnership with Unibis, SPG, thanking everyone for having had, through Renata, this facilitation. Thank you. And the interpreters, Vivian and Isabella, that were able to help with the communication for those who can't follow us in Portuguese. So see you next week, next Thursday, and 11 o'clock, where we're going to talk about this empathy, compassion, and I hope that you have we're going to have excellent speakers and professionals representing a recent partnership, which is very important, and June Hartford Foundation. Thank you, and see you next week.